Thank you so much, Raleigh. I think that our special guest Elke deserves a far more detailed introduction and bio, but rather than just simply reading it, I really look forward to interweaving it into our conversation. I'll very briefly just say that Elke Lehrenkrauss, and forgive my, I'm sure, not nearly as elegant pronunciation, is a Berlin-based filmmaker and visual artist. She graduated in 2012 with distinction from the Academy of Media Arts Cologne. And her films and artworks have been exhibited at festivals, in museums and galleries worldwide, and she's won numerous awards. And I was particularly struck to learn in her bio that Lovemobil is her feature debut. Of course, you have made many, many shorts, but why that struck me was just how accomplished and how such a confident cinematic style and elegant approach. It really struck me as very, very sophisticated for a feature debut. So congratulations. But I guess we'll start at the very beginning and work our way through. There's so many things to talk about here. I'm sure you get this question a lot, but this is such an intriguing topic. So I'd love to start from the very beginning, which is what drew you to this story and your own kind of personal, at least geographical connection to that origin story.
Yes, well, thank you for the nice introduction. I just shortly wanted to say, I have made shorts, but some of them, or two of them were already 60 minutes, but I never crossed the line of 60 minutes. It always got stuck there because the topic was not so important. But with Lovemobil, it was actually supposed to be a short, a 50-minute short, but it developed into a long feature debut because what I found there, like all the stories needed like a feature.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. It's really interesting, something we can definitely talk about.
So so it's actually also the reason, the reason why I made this film is because when I come from the city, Gifhorn it's called. It's in Lower Saxony, somewhere in the northern middle of Germany, with lots of countryside. And the Lovemobils are surrounding the city. So it's actually, I've known them since childhood. But what has changed since I've been a child is that when I was young, the sex workers were all Germans, and so during the last 10 years, more or less, most of the women come from Eastern Europe and Africa, and yes, and I saw this when I got back home as a director. I saw this image of a woman from Africa sitting in the middle of the night in a dark German forest in a light, like flashlight caravan, and it was such a, like, this picture hit me so hard because for me it shows so much about something that really goes wrong in a society. How can this happen, that this woman got stranded there? And that was actually the point where I started researching for this project. And it's then a long journey began, because Absolutely. Of course it was not easy to find protagonists to get access to the milieu. But since Gifhorn is a very small town, somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who knew Ushi. And I met Ushi, and she got us access to the scene. So with Ushi was a strange meeting in the beginning, but she was like, I mean, she is like in the film, she's outside the film, like inside the film. She's a very interesting character, but she's very open-minded to everything. So she actually thought, oh, why not make a film? Right. And so Ushi was our first contact. And then we were researching for over 1 year and shooting landscapes all over to approach the Lovemobil. And we wanted to also to find out what the atmosphere is like. And so this took a whole year, and then we had 2 years of shooting over a period of 2 years. Altogether, it was just 60 days, but it stretched a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So because yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. I'm going to almost take us back a touch, and then I think that the question of access and gaining trust and the kind of ethical questions that must have risen for you are so extraordinary. I want to look at that with a lot of detail, but just to go back for a moment, when you describe your initial interest, it's striking that here you are, growing up and seeing these caravans with, I presume, like almost exclusively German sex workers as a child, becomes part of the natural landscape. But if I'm hearing you correctly, it's particularly the fact that this has become eclipsed now with a predominantly foreign sex worker in those spaces that is where, like, the specific inquiry. So, so when you were thinking about, like, the question at the heart of this film and the desire to make the film, was it kind of not so much what is it like to be a sex worker working on the side of a road in this space, but specifically the question of what does it mean to be, coming a foreigner and coming here, this kind of globalization of the need for that. First of all, am I accurately understanding that?
Yes.
So,
yes,
okay. And so I'd love to just take a moment to spend a little space in there, about, what, having spent this time, what did you begin to learn about that question that the film and your 3 years of spending time starts helping you answer? And the significance of these, the unique circumstances of these being foreign sex workers in this rural environment.
Yeah, exactly. That is because I did not choose the topic of sex work or prostitution and wanted to make a film about it. So the approach was really about this image, which for me is, this strong image of a globalized capitalism, and it this is the dead end of it, and it hits the weakest. And that's what I mean by all of them now come from foreign countries, which also includes abuse. I was also shooting with a woman from Germany. She was 60 years old, and 2 years ago, at the age of 58, she decided to become a sex worker because it always had been the job of her dreams. And so you cannot put her in the same vessel with the others. And yes, so I learned a lot through my investigation. Now there are only 3 protagonists in the film. Altogether, I shot with 6, and as I just said, one of them was a sex worker who really enjoyed her job, who loved her clients, and she was so popular even at her age, and it was a completely different angle. Absolutely. But in the editing process, it just did not fit together. So I concentrated on the other 3 protagonists. Yes. And yes, I kind of learned, like the biggest thing I learned, the most important thing is that you cannot compare any story to any other. Like every single woman working in these caravans has a personal story, and you can't compare it to any other story. So it's all very individual. Some are really forced there. We also met a girl who was under the power of a real pimp, and she was not allowed to talk to us. It was really, really, really dangerous also to start talking to her, for us with her. And this is one side, and the other side was Ira, the 60-year-old liberated sex worker. And so in between this big range, everything happened, And Milena and Rita kind of show this gray zone between I'm here voluntarily, but not really, because I'm in a way economically forced. I want to take responsibilities for my family. Somehow I slipped into it, and now I cannot find my way out. They are not chained to they're not chained there, but they still cannot leave, you know. And this is like this paradox I found, that many women who get into this business can't leave. Like Milena, she has a friend who really wants to pull her out, but she just can't. She goes back in the film.
Right.
In the reality, she then left, but in the film she goes back. And
yes.
So yes, and this is like what I wanted to show. I did not want to explain everything. I just wanted to open doors for discussion through this film. And
Certainly.
I think you can discuss a lot. You can discuss, is this what they do? Is it work? What is freedom? Are they doing it voluntarily? And like this, the whole capitalist thing, and the thing of power and abuse of power. And so this film is just there to open up discussions on this topic in the best case.
I'm going to try to do my best to juggle questions that are coming in, as well as, you know, kind of lead us through a trajectory here. But I want to respond. Art Chimes has asked the question about the fact that we understand that you were involved in this project for over 3 years, the first year largely research and then shooting for 2 years, but is struck by most of the images appearing to be winter. I personally noticed fall for sure, you know, other seasons, but this particular question suggests that we largely see kind of winter landscapes, which were very striking, but is wondering, you know, what, if you were shooting for over 2 years, you know, why is there not a sense of the seasonality in the film?
I actually made this, the film starts in winter, then it becomes spring, and then we have summer, and then we have autumn, and then it ends in winter. So winter seems so much because it starts and it ends there. And I just wanted to tell a 1 year cycle. And after winter, there's just some epilogue about Rita who leaves. And for me, the time plays a big role. I wanted to show that the time goes by, the people come, they go, they are like ghosts who appear, who vanish, and time doesn't really change anything, you know, all through the seasons, but nothing really changed. And also the landscape and the 4 seasons for me are also reflecting soul landscapes in a way. And to be honest, we only had, in these 2 years of shooting, we only had, I think, 3 or 4 days of winter. I think 3 days. And we really or used, like I was in Gifhorn, and I'm like calling my cinematographer, it's snowing, you have to come, it's snowing, we have to shoot now. And because snow in winter always has something that makes life even harder.
Yes,
especially in the caravans. And sure. I wanted to have this in the film, to, in a poetic way, show how hard this life is in a metaphoric way. That's why there's so much winter in the film. Yeah.
So obviously, I love that you introduced this notion of time, and, you know, clearly, so what I really appreciate so much about this film is kind of the antithesis of how Hollywood would convey the story. That is, so much time is spent recognizing the passage of time and the reality that so much of this job, this work, is waiting, and thinking about a cinematic language and a cinematic experience for audiences to wait and to be with Rita and Milena as they wait, and what that looks like. And I think that's where I think there's something very bold and confident in your filmmaking, to trust that we need to allow audiences to understand waiting is a part of this experience. And the most sensational, presumably, aspects, the actual sex, you know, the actual sex things, are understandably largely, you know, there's, you know, we get to see little moments of intimacy, if you want to call it that, but it's off screen. And I know, you know, kind of obviously a deliberate choice. So I want to first commend you for that, but also love to talk more about your strategy, you know, thinking about how do we build a film that's compelling and that's going to keep audiences engaged, that recognizes that we need to wait, we need to sit, we need to recognize the slow passage of time. I'd love to just hear how you were thinking about that as a filmmaker and your team and the editing room, all of that.
Yes, the passing of time. Like when I started to develop the visualization of this film, I just wanted to get away from the stylistic approach, far away from journalist formats, because it's sex and crime, and that's always related to the boulevard press. So I needed to find a way to make it to make it really different. And since I also come from the visual arts, it was very important for me to make it visually nice. Stupid word.
Like aesthetic.
Aesthetic, aesthetic, but not over aesthetic. I also wanted to make it for the big screen, for the cinema, and I wanted to make it look like as if it was a feature. You're watching a feature, because I wanted the audience to really participate in the destiny and in the stories of Milena and Rita and Ushi, of my protagonists. I really wanted to draw them in, and this works for me. It mostly works better when you kind of have the feeling, okay, this is some kind of fiction documentary, and really sucks you in, and also the visualization, the style of the images are made for the big screen. And I did not want to make a film about facts or statistics. I wanted to make it for the audience that they feel what it would be like being stuck in a caravan, very atmospheric, that you feel this loneliness in this vast countryside, and this really tiring job, that waiting is the biggest part. And I wanted to force audience to really live through this with Milena and Rita. And so it was, in the shooting, it was kind of difficult, because when we got there, the girls told me also, well, most of the time we just sit there and wait, and then I'm like, okay, I cannot make 120 minutes waiting. So I had to really listen to what happens in their life and meet the people they meet and ask them to please come by when we are shooting, so something happens. But since waiting is the biggest part of their job too, like one big part, I needed to put this in the movie too.
Yes, absolutely.
To show their
so
life.
We have a couple of questions coming in, and part of, there's a little bit of overlap. So I'll try to consolidate them. And it's, I'm sure, a question you get asked a lot, which is the clients, the customers. So a few things here. One is questions around, was it difficult to get them to agree to be filmed? And what was that experience like? And then there's a second part to this question that I'll come to afterwards. But let's talk about the clients that appear in the film and how that all was navigated and negotiated.
Yeah, I know this question, actually.
I'm sure.
Well, and the answer is, it was the least of my problem to find clients who wanted to perform in the film. I had so many offers. At some point I really had to deny. Well, the clients were in, it's a little crazy, yes. The clients that are in the film are regular clients, acquaintances from our protagonist. We asked me, because when we started to develop this film, of course the question was, do we show sex, do we show clients? And then we said, yes, we do want to show this, because it's part of their job, otherwise we would deny the realities. And so we wanted, like, yes, then we asked them, our protagonists, if they knew any regular clients who would come by and be there when we film. And surprisingly, they said, oh yeah, I know some. So they called them up and asked, hey, here's a film team, and would you come by? And I would talk to the clients and explain them what this all is about and where it all will be shown. They were like, oh, okay, I'm cool with that. And they came by. And yes, it's surprising, but it's a different, how do you say, it's a different milieu, it's a different it's a different perspective they have. For them, going to sex worker or prostitute is something they are not ashamed of, which is kind of normal. They don't see any problem in that. So I also have to say that sex work in Germany is legal,
right?
And so they don't see any crime they are committing.
Right.
There were even family fathers who would come, but I would not cut them into the film then, because I had some problems with them with that, if their sons or daughters. So
were they willing to be in the film? Were you the one who made that decision not to disclose them? Even though, are you suggesting that
no,
they would have been? That's
incredible. Like I talked them that it will be screened in cinemas, in festivals, on TV, and I gave them like even 3 weeks to, after the shooting, think about it, and it was fine with them. Just then that I thought I didn't really need it either, and so I didn't feel good doing it. And
absolutely.
So the film also works without all that. And we even got to shoot sex scenes. We were not prepared as a film team, just happened. We were just like, oh, okay, you guys just go on. But all this, it was also with a different protagonist. So all this is not in the film. And also it didn't make sense to put it in, because it's the film is about something else.
Right, absolutely. So there's two more. So second part of this question from Ira Tattleman, I hope I've said your name correctly, is could you tell us about your relationship with the protagonist since the film was finished? So have you had an ongoing relationship, or what has the relationship been with particularly Ushi, Milena, and Rita post-film?
Yes, okay. It went on, it goes on until today. After the shooting, like Milena, Rita leaves in the film, and after that she would, I just had the room free at my apartment here in Berlin, and so she stayed with me for, I think, 3 more weeks until she went on and to Italy, and went then back to Nigeria. And with Milena too, I'm in contact. She also lives in Berlin, is out of the whole scene. She has nothing to do anymore with prostitution. And we actually met last week, because we are planning to make a short film together about a complete different subject, because she completely has changed her life too, which is good for me in the film, because otherwise I would have really had problems traveling around the world with it, knowing they are all still sitting there. And so we have a good relationship. She was my babysitter for some time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, she became a good acquaintance, good friend. Yeah.
Ushi in particular is a very fascinating character because of her, the cycle of her own, once having been a sex worker, and now this kind of interesting relationship she has. She's by no means a pimp, but as that kind of conversation happens, there is a degree of exploitation, if you want to accept that. I think I'd love to just talk a little bit more about Ushi as a character, and the way in which she has this kind of complex role. How do you feel? What you offer, I think, a very nuanced and layered portrait of Ushi, where I think audiences have an opportunity to kind of continue to shift their perspectives and feelings about her as we move along, which is wonderful. She's, complex, but I'd love to just kind of get a sense from you, about Ushi and her, and the significance and importance of that subject in this film, and what she represents. And the cycles of oppression type thing.
Ushi is like you said, she for me too is like the most complex character of the whole film, and she's a really great film character. The editing process was different from the editing process in regard to Milena and Rita, because they both have a story. Milena, she is there, and then she goes to Berlin, and then she goes back. She has her story. And Rita, she arrives experiences something, and then she leaves again. And Ushi was just there all the time. So I had to create the story through her personality, through her personality that unravels. We meet her in the first few moments as a kind of antagonist, as a businesswoman who wants to make business no matter what. And so she's actually, we think she's weird. We don't really like her, but at least she's weird. And then we get her to know a lot better. There are moments when she freaks out, when the missionary priest, missionary comes by, who really gets her angry, and we really see what she really thinks and feels. And then in the next moment, she becomes like a good friend. She's like talking with Rita, telling about her experience in her love life. And so I really liked Ushi, that she's this, and the next moment she's this other. She's not predictable. And then throughout this we learn about her story, that she has been a sex worker, and in the end, in the very, very end, we learn that she has been forced to abuse by her own mother at the age of 13, which is like the most terrible thing that can happen to you, and a fracture of trust that can actually never be repaired again. And so this is in the end. And it's also something she told me on our last shooting day. So we were actually in contact with her 3 years, shooting with her over 2 years. And then in our last shooting day, in our last interview, she told me that. And I'm like, okay, wow, this is crazy. And I asked her, can I use it for the film too? And she was okay with it, because it's very intimate. And so since I felt this sensation of, oh my God, this kind of changes it does not excuse things, but it changes my perspective on Ushi a little bit. I wanted to like, since this happened to me, I thought maybe it's like intelligent to put this information at the end, not in the beginning. For it would be some kind of excuse, you know. It would be like, okay, she's a businesswoman, but she has been, you know, it would not work out. And yeah, she's everything. I mean, she is actually doing the job of a man, because normally it's this kind of pimp thing is a man thing. And I'm actually happy that she's a woman, because to this I do not have to say, okay, the bad man and the poor women, always victim. It can also be a woman if she uses, if she plays after the rules of patriarchy and oppression. So it's gets complex at this moment. And Ushi, who should actually stand up for this woman, does not. When she gets to the point where she can take over power, she does the same that has happened to her. And so this is what I mean. The film is actually there to start thinking about many things. And
yes, exactly. It's an extraordinary, she provides such an extraordinary opportunity for that. There's a question that's taking us back to what we talked about a moment ago, and then I don't want to forget. I think I want to come back to that particular moment when Ushi is talking about Rita, in front of Rita, to the missionary. We'll come back to that, but to respect the question in the chat here. So you had mentioned before that Milena and Rita have left prostitution. And the question is, do you think that your role as a filmmaker and your interest in their lives had any influence on their decision to leave the business of prostitution?
Like for Milena, actually, yes, it had. And she also told me during the shooting, after the shooting, and even in the beginning, she told me that she wants to make this film because she also sees it as a way to leave, because she was playing with the idea of leaving this place for a long time and never really got it going. And so she said, okay, maybe this puts some pressure on me and I have to leave after that or something. And so it was good. The camera was kind of a something that puts a process, makes it quicker, a process. And
right, like a catalyst, I think you were saying. A catalyst,
yeah, something like that. And so I think when somebody puts a camera on you, you really start reflecting on your life. It happened with one protagonist who's not on the film because we only had one day of shooting with her. It was a young woman. She was 28, and she has been in the business since she was 14. She got drawn into it through a friend who was a little older, who said, hey, you can earn good money and it's like really cool. And she was thinking of, oh, maybe it's like Pretty Woman and stuff. And she was really amazed by the fact that somebody would pay money for her. And, you know, for her, it was easy money in the beginning. And like in the interview I had with her, I asked her questions and she was telling me her story. And then suddenly she really burst into tears because she suddenly realized, she told me, and now it's half of my life. And then she told me she cannot do this because it's too much. It's the camera is so intense, and she has to leave this shooting because otherwise she would have to leave the job, and she doesn't want at this point, or it currently totally got her confused. And I was in contact with her afterwards too, and she's out of the business now too. Also because of many other reasons, but I think this was the initial moment, and I think that it was not my I did not go there in order to help everybody to get out of the business. It was by itself, through making this film, and yeah, I think it really also gave them perspectives and self-reflection, because many of them do not want to think about it because it's too painful. But when there's this camera and these questions come, yeah, you kind of start reflecting.
So fascinating. It's true, you know, right? I think that there's so many things intertwined there, that it's partly, you know, your particular interest. You're looking at their lives and their story and offering them this opportunity for reflection, which is a very different goal than the kind of salacious, titillating aspects of the job, or the kind of even the sensational kind of brutality of the job. And I recall in an interview, you had also mentioned that the same kind of notion of penetrating that one of the, you had said, and forgive me if I'm not fully understanding the full context, but that also while you were shooting some of the scenes that did involve sex, which of course ended up on the editing room floor, that you realized in some ways your presence there created a painful awareness on the part of the women who typically could disassociate, and that kind of hyper awareness, because of the presence of the camera, made it hard to disassociate, and therefore kind of offered a more traumatic experience to some extent of the sexual encounter. And obviously that's not something that we bear witness to on screen, because you chose, you know, that's not there, but it sounds like that was an experience you had as a filmmaker, and part of what helped move you to the choice perhaps to not extensively film the sexual encounters, but also to not have that on screen.
Yeah, exactly. Like also the sex suddenly was not important, or it was not political. It was not political sex. I always say it was just sex, and it kind of, when I saw it in the editing room, it really, at this moment I saw it, it was abusive. Also for me, as a filmmaker, voyeuristic. It just did not work out. And yeah, I also wanted to say, like, this this process of Milena, what the camera did, that she, when she was in Berlin, she also went to Berlin in order to tell her friends, and she wanted to do it with us. So to her, she wouldn't. She said she will not do it without us. She's no, but she needs somebody to support her in that. And her friend didn't know. She told Milena told her friend, okay, these are my friends. They are making a film about Bulgarians in Berlin. And we were there when she told her friend, but yeah, she wanted us to be there.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. I actually wondered about that. That was a kind of subtle question I had in my mind, wondering how, if she had not disclosed yet, why, what she was doing, how she excused to her friend initially the presence of a film crew, what was the reason behind that? So you've kind of proactively answered that.
Yes.
I know that we have, there was a comment in the chat, and actually I believe it comes from our dear Raleigh, reflecting back on the experience of seeing the film in Berlin, I believe, and kind of talking about how one thing that was really striking was how there were many moments where the audience actually laughed, that there was a great deal of, the whole theater was laughing audaciously, reacting, for example, when Ushi instructed Rita on how to design, kind of reorient the towel to make it appear as if it's brand new. Apparently that got a huge laugh, and other kinds of things. I think this is more of a comment than a question, but just noting that in addition to, some of the trauma that we see, that there was also, apparently the film has received this. So I guess maybe I can turn this into a question, which is, what have there been surprises to you about the kinds of reactions you've gotten? What might you have anticipated and expected, and what, to Raleigh's point, were moments that perhaps have taken you by surprise? And I know you've been screening this internationally, so I also wonder if you're noticing different kinds of reactions in different countries and environments.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to say, of course, it's a tragic topic, but still there's always a laughter to life. I mean, I come from a family who has all been in war, who has World War II, my grandmother, my mother, my father. And but they told me, even in war, there is something you laugh about, because you cannot just, there's always something that gets you on. And most of the time, it's the weirdness of life, even if it's very tragic. And this is in those moments when strange things happen. Even when Ushi is discussing with a missionary, there is something you don't laugh, but it's like absurd, and you kind of, where am I? And all these moments, I really appreciate, because that's just life. And now I kind of forgot the reaction.
Yeah, and if you've noticed, so I guess two parts. One is, are there different kinds of reactions that have come as a surprise to you? And also, do you notice that some reactions really differ depending on where they're shown in kind of, like, so for example, in the US where prostitution is illegal, are the reactions quite different, the kinds of questions different than, let's say, Germany, or the Netherlands, where there might be a different position towards prostitution?
It's a very interesting question, because there is actually no difference at all in the questions and in the reactions of people from different countries. It has been screened a lot in the US. It has been screened in Eastern Europe. It was in the Shanghai Film Festival. So it was actually once around the globe, except for the Arab countries. But the reactions are always the same. I think it's such a universal topic. Each country has to deal with, that I have never felt any. I was surprised by that too, but the reactions were always similar.
That's fascinating.
Which kind of surprised me a little bit, but I also understand, because it's not just something that happens here in Germany and is different in the US or in Eastern Europe. Sometimes I was very touched when people told me that they cried in the movie. I'm like, wow, okay, that's it really touched them. And yes, but the reactions were similar.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you offer so many opportunities. So I'm not surprised, that people were so moved that they might cry. I think that you really render all of your subjects with so much humanity and so much, level. I feel particularly Rita, really moved me in many ways, and that was what I wanted to come back to. You had, we talked a little bit about that moment when Ushi's talking to the missionary, and of course Rita's just sitting there, kind of the subject of their conversation, treated yet again a little bit like an object, the way she is in these sexual environments, like this being, and so going kind of circling all the way back to the beginning of our conversation with the fact that this is really focused on foreign sex workers, and Rita in particular. I think race plays out in really poignant ways for everybody, but certainly for Rita. We have some punctuated moments. Ushi's interpretation of African women, and so insensitive, her experience at that bar where the clients aren't interested in her because of the color of her skin. She's not given a chance to, or they're not interested in, the guy there doesn't really want to take her on. So I would just love to, just learn a little bit more from you of, your understand, like how, race was particularly playing out with respect to Rita, and how you kind of navigated that. And it's hard for me to even articulate this as a question, but it's more like a comment. So forgive me for making that a little hard on you, but I would just love to hear how you've been processing the presentation of race as Rita, as a catalyst.
Yeah. Like when I met Ushi, and she, like, it's when you dive into this microcosm of the Lovemobils, of this prostitution and sex industry in the countryside, you quickly realize this is a different world, and our moral standards are not applicable here. So there's actually, you find everything there we kind of try to get rid of in our society. You find it there. There is like this really hardcore racism. There is the disrespect towards women, of course, and it's a completely different world. So when they like Ushi and her friends would talk about the women, they would always talk about them, like it's also shown in the film, they talk about them as some kind of ware, some kind of something they can make business with. It's not people. It's it's like of course people, but it's something. Okay, Ushi always wanted to get a white woman because with her she earns more money. Well, the white woman would earn more money in her eyes because, and then she will always get regular rent from her. Because, and that is like when she told me that, I'm like, okay, I'm here in some really different microcosmos. Let's make my way through. And it's also like the Lovemobils of Ushi's women are in a different place from Milena. It's kind of apart, and I was actually really shocked. But I wanted to document this. I always felt really terrible doing it, but sometimes you kind of have to do it in order to show this is still there. This really hardcore racism is not something we invent. It is there. It's just not on the surface. But if you dig deeper, it is there. And yeah. Absolutely. And it was really it was sad. And also the scene we shot in this bar was one of the hardest scene for me, actually. Seeing Rita being so abused in such a bad way, and she was really devastated after that. It was that was tough. Yeah.
I see another question here, and it's a question asking if you've seen the documentary Whore's Glory, okay, which is also about prostitution, and if so, did you take anything away from that as you worked on this project?
I've seen it. It's by Glauberger, but no, I've seen it, but it did not affect or influence me on my film. I think it's very. I think it's a great film, but it's very different. I think Glauberger has a very different approach, and it's also about. He really chose the topic of prostitution. He wanted to make a film about prostitutes or sex workers worldwide. And for me, as I said in the beginning, it was a different approach. So just in short, this film is about sex workers / prostitutes all over the world, in India, in Latin America, and somewhere else, I think. But it's really the topic, prostitution worldwide.
Right, and yours is, you know, very hyper specific.
It is kind of also different approach to the topic. Since I was not searching for the topic of prostitution, it came the other way around.
Right. With that in mind, are there any kind of cinematic or thematic influences on this film? You know, whether it be just the look of the film, or the slow, you know, the commitment to the slowness, or the topic. What has influenced you in the making of this?
Actually, in the topic, I was not influenced by anything, because it's always different. If you think about the topic and then you hit reality, you cannot apply it on this. I did not read books about prostitution in advance, because that really gives you an idea, and then you go there with this idea, and you always want to find this, what you've been reading, and I will always want to enter free, like without prejudice or I've heard from somewhere else, or I've read. So I did not prepare in that sense for the topic, which for me is always the good way, because I'm like open to everything. And but of course in the visual and stylistic way, we were discussing a lot, me and my cinematographer. We had days of just wandering through the landscapes and imagining what we want to shoot. And surprisingly, Fargo by the Coen brothers was always because it's
I love that film.
it's kind of inspired us. And
what specifically? I'm quite familiar. What is there, like the landscape of Minnesota? Like, what was it, that the way it looked, the kind of open plains, the rhythm?
Yeah, and also the rhythm and the characters were kind of really strange.
Yes.
Too, and like the landscape too. Not really. I mean, this is Germany and that's Minnesota, but it's kind of like this countryside, you know, and everybody is by car and kind of slow, and weird people meet weird people. And we also, in the beginning, we had this feeling we are in this kind of strange world with lots of weirdos. And so we would always think of Fargo.
That's fantastic.
But then we found our own way of developing the vision, the image. And
we're getting towards the end, and I would be remiss to not bring up a major kind of significant moment in the film, which is the murder. You know, which I can't, I mean, it was just very shocking. And of course, at least for me, when I first wondered, oh, is this that woman that we briefly met, the friend of Rita's who visits her in the, or maybe, I'm sorry, maybe it was Melena's friend that she sits with her in the car. I actually can't remember which of the women she sits with. But I mean, that must have been, how did that impact your shooting, your feeling about the shooting, your subjects, you know, since it was so close and such a disturbing?
Yeah, it's like, first of all, it's very sad, but this murder is not the only murder that happened there. Oh. Actually, there were 2 murders within 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
And every year you read in the newspapers at least twice that something bad has happened. A woman has been beaten to have so badly beaten that she has to be hospitalized. A caravan was set on fire. A woman was hit by a car when she crossed the road because she wanted to visit her friend. So it's this murder. It's hard to say it like this, but it did not come by surprise. It was actually something that would have happened at some point. Like when it happened, I was not in Gifhorn, I was in Berlin. And so we went there for shooting, and we talked to Milena and all the others. So the montage in the film is a little fake, if I can say it like that. The blurry lights, the blurry lights were, because I really wanted this for the film, The Murder, because it's like the top of the inhumane scene they are working in, and I thought I felt the necessity to tell about it, because it's very important to know this is not just a joke. It just does not only feel lonely and dangerous, it really is.
Right,
it really
absolutely,
is.
absolutely.
And so like when Milena tells us, that was when we visited her. But for example, when Ushi drives by, and there are blue lights, blue car lights, police lights, that is from that seem like murder, that is something else. It was, I think it was a different moment, and we just thought, oh, let's film it. Maybe we can use it later in the editing. And so I kind of constructed out of the material around this scene of Milena when she tells us about the murder, through around this.
Right, absolutely. Right, as we all, that would be something Werner Herzog might call the ecstatic truth rather than the truth of attorneys. That in documentaries sometimes, it's still true, but it's it's kind of a poetic truth. And that reminds me, as we kind of slowly begin to wrap ourselves up, in the quote from the jury when you won an award at the film festival in Urbino, Italy, I noted that they said, for the equilibrium between the argument and the style, between documentary and fiction. And I just wondered, I didn't fully grasp what they might be referring to, and if there's some element of overt fiction in your film that, I'm not asking you to necessarily interpret what the jury is saying, but I want to make sure that I have not missed something, and by extension our audiences. Are there deliberate elements of fiction interwoven in this film?
I think there are always elements of fiction when you construct a documentary. When you put, it's also a fiction when I make I make 1 year, but it was 2 years of shooting.
Right.
It's always some kind. That's like when you refer to Werner Herzog. Yes. I think that's exactly it. Like the aesthetic truth, not the attorney's truth.
That's right.
The only thing I think for me as a documentarian is important that I present something that is showing a reality that really exists, but you can juggle with elements, you can juggle with words, but in the end it must show a picture that really is there. Yes. And for that you have to construct, you have to construct a film, you have to narrate a story and all that. And I think the fiction is more because it looks like a fiction, because we wanted it to make it look like a fiction. Yep. So you never really know, where am I,
Absolutely.
And
I think that's beautifully articulated, and I agree with you. I tend to teach documentary film, and I'm always, when my students first arrive, they treat documentary almost as if it's objective journalism. And, very quickly I dismantle that and kind of make it clear that, these are points of view and perspectives. Exactly. And the more a documentary, I think, is revealing of that, of its own construction and kind of the more honest I think it is, because it all is a construction, as you say, the editing room where you frame the camera and what's edited. Yeah. And, I think when a film has a kind of cinematic quality, it's reminding us of its process, its construction, it's the tools. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I also think like the moment when a client is suddenly in the room, enters the room, it's obvious. There must have been, this is not like direct cinema. There must have been somebody talking to somebody before. Right. And so for me, I was discussing this a lot, but for me, it was never about, being a direct cinema maker. I just wanted to narrate this story that I found, and yeah, like it's also a question of perspective always.
Yeah, yeah. Well, clearly, I mean, I think you've created an extraordinary portrait that is both beautiful and harrowing and important. And it's received so much well-deserved recognition internationally. And we're so honored that you've first, I'm just so delighted to have had this opportunity to talk with you. And I'm so delighted that it was selected for Film Noir. And I think right now I will, now that we're at the top of the hour, bring back Raleigh, who I think wants to have some closing remarks.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Sky and to Elke. That was really, for me, just really incredible to listen to, and I hope that everybody who tuned in enjoyed that as well. We really appreciate, yeah, having you guys on board. It was great to be able to do this virtually. Again, I just keep saying that over and over, but as the curator of Film Noir, it's just been amazing to be able to take this virtually and to be able to see that it is possible to bring something nice still to Washington D.C. area and to our audience in this time where it's just crazy. And so it's been really nice to be able to bring Film Noir, and it's been wonderful to be able to bring Lovemobil. It really is just like a great documentary. I loved watching that. I mean, it's one of those. I remember watching, reading somebody's critique of it from a festival, and they said it's one of those documentaries that it sticks with you for a really long time when you finish watching it. And as somebody who watched it for the first time back in February, I can definitely say that that was the case for me, because I was still thinking about it when I sent the sent the inquiry about showing it, you know, a few weeks ago. So, and that doesn't really happen that often with films. And so, thanks so much for making this film. It's a great, very important film. And thank you so much, Sky, for your very thoughtful and great, as usual, like trenchant commentary. And yeah, thanks to everybody who tuned in for your commentary and questions. It's been really great to be able to interact with you all in this way, in lieu of having a cinema. And just in saying that, shout out to Landmarks East Street Cinema, who we have in our thoughts, because
absolutely.
they are usually our partner for this stuff, and so we hope they make it through COVID. But yeah,
Yes, for sure.
so yeah, so thank you so much again. We hope that you all continue to enjoy the films for Film Noir as the weekend goes on, and we hope that you all have a great weekend. And Elke, we hope you have a great night.
Definitely. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for this great interview.
Wonderful talking to you.
And thanks, Raleigh, for really remembering me and the film. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Everybody have a great evening. Good night.
Great evening. Thank you. Bye.